Welcome to my car. This is going to be a very advanced law of assumption, law of attraction, manifestation video. So advanced that I'm wearing an Anna and Elsa hat. Doesn't get much more advanced than that. If you think I'm kidding, I really am wearing an Anna and Elsa hat. And really, despite the comedy of me wearing this hat, me being in the car, we're going to discuss some stuff in this video that I have discovered the hard way, mainly in my dozen or so years of trying to integrate these ideas into my life, and also integrate these ideas into clients' lives and to readers' lives of people who have read my books. If you have not read any of my books, you can get one of them for free. Link will be in the description to my book, The Law of Attraction Simplified, which is probably a better LOA book than just about any you've read. The other day I made a short video quoting Joel Goldsmith, who's one of my favorite LOA type of teachers. And a lot of people, by the way, would not say he's an LOA teacher at all. I think he is. But the reason I like Goldsmith so much, and the quote I read the other day, I'm going to read it again, is Goldsmith talks about something that many of us will experience if we're into these ideas for long enough, which is basically, for most of us, we find out about Neville or Abraham or Dr. Joe or whoever, and at first we probably think this has a lot to do with techniques. And if you go on YouTube, most channels are talking about techniques. You do this one technique, you do this special technique, and something happens and it manifests. But if you get into this stuff long enough, in all likelihood, what's going to happen is, even if you do have success with certain techniques or a single technique like SATs, for instance, or some kind of affirmation or some kind of journaling, some kind of specific meditation, even if you do have success, maybe massive success with the technique, if you're at this stuff long enough, chances are that that technique will not continue to deliver the way it once did. And there's a very good chance after a few years, you'll come to the realization there's a heck of a lot more to this than just techniques, and that none of this stuff truly is mechanical, but is really the way that Neville talked about it, which is imaginative, and the way that Emile Coué, so eloquently and clinically spoke about it to patients that he helped. And that is that your imagination is really running the show. And it's about whether you embrace that or not and start to work with it more gently and compassionately by embracing it in this way. And embracing it gently and more compassionately is not a technique. And what many of us find who kind of are spiritually inclined is you get to a point where you're like, I don't know what technique to use anymore. None of these techniques actually fulfill me. And this does not mean that if you're watching this video and you've made it this far and you're watching Anna and Elsa and you are like still thinking, well, I like a technique works for me. I'm not telling you not to use a technique. I am the opposite of dogmatic. My point is, use whatever works for you. Whatever helps you utilize your wonderful human imagination, to paraphrase Neville. And many of us will come to the point, I certainly did relatively quickly, probably within a year or two of getting into these ideas, where I was like, man, nothing can beat me simply just resting in the moment now, resting in God, so to speak. And in the years since then, about the 10 years since then, since that initial realization, I've come to realize again and again, whenever I play with techniques, because there's so many fascinating techniques out there. Neville's techniques. You read The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. There's so many fascinating techniques in there. Go on, the playlist on my channel. We've got videos galore about techniques because they're so interesting. But whenever I play with those techniques so seriously, or at all even, they never end up fulfilling me long term. What has always fulfilled me is simply resting in God, resting in the universe. And why I still contemplate and talk about Joel Goldsmith's teaching so much, even though Goldsmith annoys the heck out of me a lot of the time, because there's so much Christian Science residue, so much dogma in the background. The reason I talk about Goldsmith still is because no manifestation type of teacher that I know of so consistently hammers the point that you only have to contemplate God. And this is something that so many of the great teachers point at. Just Goldsmith does it, relentlessly. Neville, for instance, Neville's so known for his techniques, but he also talks a lot about, like, just imagine not being able to behold iniquity, right? That's basically the same thing. Joseph Murphy talks about the absolute method, which is contemplating God, which is so pure and is unable to, see evil. And just by contemplating God, doing this absolute method, naturally having your life or other people's lives transform. H. Emily Cady, probably the best spiritual sounding LOA teacher I know of, because Coué is the best clinical teacher. But if you want a spiritual sounding teacher, I would probably, if you're new here, I would take H. Emily Cady over Neville or Joseph Murphy or Catherine Ponder or any of them. Again, my playlist section, bunch of H. Emily Cady videos. She talks about trustful passivity. When all else fails, we just trustfully are there with God. That's what so much of her best work is about. Emmett Fox, who was greatly influenced by Cady, the Golden Key. He's famous for the Golden Key. Stop thinking about your problems and think about God instead. Contemplate God instead. All pretty much the same thing. It's just Goldsmith hammers this home. Goldsmith at his best, and there's a lot of Goldsmith at his best, despite all the bullshit he says, and despite all the bullshit that we all say. And again, you got to take what you like, including obviously everything Papa Bear Tim says with this Anna and Elsa hat, and just forget the rest. But I like a lot of what Goldsmith says, and listen to this passage, because what he says here is what he constantly says, and it's very succinct in this passage. This is again from his book Invisible Supply, which happens to be my favorite Joel Goldsmith book. And it's actually not a book he wrote, by the way. It's just a collection of lectures and teachings that was put together after his death. He says, probably the most important principle in the message of the infinite way, which is Goldsmith's approach. He called it the infinite way. Probably the most important message of the infinite way is that we never use God for any purpose. We never use God, nor do we use truth to overcome sin, disease, or death. On the contrary, in the infinite way, we seek to become the instruments of truth. We open ourselves so that we may be used by God, by truth. In other words, we seek to become the instruments through which God may manifest itself as our individual being and live its life as us, to guide, direct, govern, sustain, maintain, support, and supply. That's very, very accurate in my experiences. That's how this stuff often works. You reach a point, or many of us do, paraphrase the Bible, I myself can do nothing. But even at that point, even in the depths of hell, you are always one with the Father. You can always recognize in some way that you are one with the universe, one with God right now. Because how could you not be? And by doing that, coming from that perspective more, recognizing that more. Because this is using your wonderful human imagination when you do this, guys. It's a very different perspective than most people have. Recognizing that even in the depths of hell, I am one with the Father, or whatever language you want to use. And that God can never leave you, because God is closer to you than, so closeness doesn't even matter, right? Like that Pascal quote that Neville liked to use and that Goldsmith sometimes uses. If you know, you know. If you don't, you know. We open ourselves so that we may be used by God. We're not trying to manifest anything. We are allowing ourselves for God to manifest itself. And guess what? God is always manifesting itself. always. And the more we are open to that and recognize that, the more peaceful and relaxed we can be about the whole darn process. It's not even a process, really. This is salvation. Right now, right now, right now. Changes our perspective on things. And it no longer is about me, Tim, manifesting something. It's about God being God. And we can't fail in that regard. And we can't secede either. But that paradox is where the peace is in my experiences.